Hey friends, it's Jonathan Rogers. Before we get started with the episode, I want to tell you about the Focus Retreat that's coming up at the end of October. In many long years as a writer, I've learned two things. One, when I need to jumpstart a project or get big chunks written, it's really helpful to get away and get significant time alone. And two, significant time alone can pull me into a whirlhole of self-absorption that makes it nearly impossible for me to jumpstart a project or get big chunks written. It's the great paradox of the writing life, this need to be alone, competing with the truth that the inside of your brain can be a pretty rough neighborhood where it isn't always safe to be alone. That's why I put together the Focus Retreat, October 26th through the 30th, at the beautiful Scarrett Bennett Center in Nashville, Tennessee. The idea of the Focus Retreat is simple. You'll have 4 days dedicated to focused work on your current work in progress, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, or poetry. You'll have big chunks of time to write, punctuated by 3 check-ins a day at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, plus evening events designed to keep the fountain of creativity flowing. One night we'll hear Nashville songwriters playing in the round. We'll spend one evening at the Rabbit Room's Northwind Manor. We'll hear from a working writer or two. To summarize, the Focus Retreat is 4 days in October in which your only responsibility will be to write. We'll feed you, give you a place to stay, give you time and space to write. You'll have plenty of alone time, but you won't be isolated. You'll have the support, accountability, and fellowship of writer colleagues who are having the same experience as you. If you're looking to make progress on a writing project, the Focus Retreat could be a huge boost. Participation is limited to just 20 writers. If you're hearing this, there's still some space left. You can find out more about the Focus Retreat and register at thehabit.co/retreats. That's thehabit.co/retreats.
This fall, bring the beauty of the Rabbit Room into your own community with House Moot. It's a self-hosted gathering where your living room, church, or backyard becomes a place for shared stories, songs, and sacred conversations. With recorded sessions, recipes, activities, discussion questions, and a gathering guide, we'll set the table for you. All you have to do is bring the guests. Get everything you need to host your own House Moot at rabbitroom.com/housemoot.
They learned that it's actually a good thing that my parents aren't superheroes. They can't come along and fix everything, because I need to be able to lean on the Lord and discover Him as my ultimate, this is where my satisfaction is found.
Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. Speaker and author Vicki Courtney has been writing books for women since the late 90s. Her new book is Motherhood is Not Your Highest Calling, The Grace of Being a Good Enough Mother. Vicki says it's the book she would have liked to have read when she was a young mother, unable to shake the idea that motherhood defined her identity. In this episode, Vicki and I talk about swapping perfect for good enough. We talk about fitting a writing life into motherhood, and we talk a little about what it's like to change your mind about something you published 20 years ago. Vicki Courtney, I'm so glad to have you on the Habit Podcast to talk about your new book, just now coming out. Motherhood is Not Your Highest Calling, The Grace of Being a Good Enough Mom. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
Okay. This has become my new first question. What's your book about?
Okay. In a nutshell, this is the book I wish had been around when I was in the thick of raising my kids. I'm now an empty nester with 10 grandchildren. The pressure moms feel just at the hands of culture, self-imposed, others in our communities, to be enough is absolutely exhausting. So I wanted to write a book that started to just peel back those layers of where's this coming from. And as I began to do that, I realized that this sort of teaching that's been out there, especially in more of our conservative circles, that motherhood is the absolute highest calling for a woman, plays into that pressure that, well, we better get this right. And we certainly can't get it wrong. So in a nutshell, that's the book. It's a book of freedom. It's a book of the grace being in the subtitle, discovering God's grace of that you're already a good enough mom is really the anthem of the book in a nutshell.
You say, no doubt your children bring much joy to your life, but they were never intended to become your life.
Yes, and I count motherhood as one of my absolute greatest joys. But again, I want women to know, mothers, that that is not our highest calling, and that it's okay to
Mhm.
pursue these other interests that you may have in your life, and to understand that your value, worth, your purpose, your identity should be rooted in Christ first and foremost.
hmm I heard this was probably a podcast ad. I guess that must have been what it was. It was an ad for vitamins or gummies or something that was like for brain development for children. Like if your kids take these, they'll be smarter than the other kids.
Right, right,
And and I thought I heard it wrong at first. The person said, we tell our kids that it's not a competition, but who are we kidding? It's a competition.
right.
And you got to give your kids every edge. And it was just, I mean, on the one hand, I appreciated the honesty, but on the other hand, it
Right.
was just shocking to hear somebody say it out loud.
Right, right. And their customer base for that ad was no doubt mothers that buy into that, because we are led to believe that we have to get it all right. And part of getting it all right is giving your kids those vitamins. It's exposing them to all the right, learning channels and
hmm
shows, and
hmm
spending quality time with them, and basically making them the absolute center of your universe. And
Yeah.
so I'm pushing back on that idea in this book that mothers are exhausted, and part of our exhaustion is coming from that idea, that concept that we believed, oftentimes peddled in within the church, that we have to put our children before anything else, because, like I said, this is your highest calling. This, you have to get it right. So
Yeah. And it's there in your subtitle, being good enough. Like
yes.
being perfect is not what we're shooting for.
Yes, so I definitely, that phrase "good enough" is going to be a key theme in the book, because mothers, just by default of being told this is our highest calling, and then it's self-imposed. I know I speak firsthand from this,
hmm
where you feel like you just can't get it wrong. I mean, everything's on the line here. You've got these little lives to take care of and invest in, and we're told that it's on your shoulders, whether that's true or not. It shouldn't be. And so this whole idea of, discovering the freedom, if you will, the grace of, you are already good enough in the eyes of God. And so that should be where our identity is coming from. And then, of course, parenting our children is a subcategory, if you will, of the higher calling to love God as, with our heart, souls, mind, and strength, to love our neighbors as ourself. 2 Corinthians talks about our calling as ambassadors for Christ, that we're called to be ministers. It uses that word ministers. And so I asked the mothers in the book, how often do you think of yourself as a minister first, and then a mother being a subcategory of having been called as a minister. And so while they are directly in your care and you're raising them in the home, you are fulfilling your role, your purpose as a minister,
hmm
but it's not just to your children. And so
Yeah.
I think where we've got it kind of mixed up is we've flipped it, haven't we? We look at it as, no, we're mothers first, and then maybe someday when our kids leave, we might pursue this idea of being ministers, which is really supposed to be our first and foremost calling. So yeah,
Yeah.
just getting into the right order, if you will.
Yeah. So, but how does a person get? I mean, you're really swimming upstream here, trying to convince people that that good enough is good enough, and that your identity as a mother is not in your children's success. How do you? I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of people would agree with you in their heads that
Right,
that
right.
these things are true, and yet it's really hard to live that way for parents, and especially mothers more than fathers, I think.
I think a lot of times we're learning as we go. I know I did, and we're
Yeah.
learning many things the hard way. So there were a couple of red flags for me, that really began to challenge this. I had embraced this whole idea that motherhood is your highest calling, embarrassingly, I wrote into one of my past books that came out in 2004. In the introduction of the book, I said motherhood is perhaps a woman's highest calling. And so for me, when I began to unravel this, it wasn't this sudden sort of aha moment, but it was a variety of factors that have been kind of colliding with that idea over the years, if you will. And yeah, so my daughter was diagnosed with unexplained infertility, and then that became, her journey for the next several years, IVF, all sorts of things. And so just watching her begin to deal with or accept the reality that she may not be able to have children of her own was painful. And there was a moment where I found myself comforting her over the fact that her older brother and sister-in-law just discovered they were expecting their second child. And she wept in my arms. And, and I was struggling for the right words and saying, you have value, you have purpose apart from being a mother. And, and I can't remember her exact words, but something to the effect, but you've always told me, Mom, that this is my highest calling. This is what, what God has for me. And I realized, that being a key moment for me that, wow, God would never call a woman to something like this and then strip it all away and say, no, but not for you. Or, I think of women who remain single, who by no fault of their own, they don't marry, they don't have children. Are they then, do they have some lesser calling on their lives? And so again, that being another sort of wake up call, I wish I had, had thought these things through sooner, but in a way, this book is almost an apology from me personally, from other women in my generation I've spoken with, that we invested everything in raising our children and the idea that this is where our value and our worth comes from. And then think about, Jonathan, like, what does it say for the empty nest years? When that last child leaves, that mom is in for a world of hurt if she has completely defined her purpose, worth, value in her role as a mother. And then the job is up, and you're always a mother, once a mother, always a mother if you have a child. But, really, what does it say for that mother? And I share in one of my chapters that it would be good for mothers today to adopt an empty nest perspective, to know that, there's going to be a time in your life that for the majority of women, should they, in the years of raising their children will be a fraction of the years that they spend with their spouse or in the empty nest years. So, that's all something that we need to be thinking about on the front end of this rather than learning the hard way. Sadly, divorce is the second highest divorce category is empty nesters now. And I really think this is a lot of the problem, this idea of it's all about the kids. And then lo and behold, that day comes, the last child leaves the nest, and you, husband, wife, look at each other and, you're mere roommates at that point. So.
As I was reading your book, Vicki, I was thinking about the fact that in some ways, kids are the final frontier for the gospel. It's really hard to believe the gospel when it comes to child rearing. And it's really hard for any of us to want our kids to need Jesus. We want to equip them so they don't need.
Right.
Nobody would say that out loud, I know, but we want, and we all know that it is hardship in our life that has built character and has built hope and has built, we know these things in our own life, and it's really hard to believe them for our kids. It's so hard not to pave the way so that things are easy. And and by the way, paving the way so things are easy that's just a myth anyway, right?
Right, exactly, yes.
I mean, think about how much people give up so that they can make sure their kids get into an Ivy League school or play Division I sports. And most kids don't get into Ivy League schools and play Division I sports, even if their parents have given up everything for it.
Yes, it sounds like you may have read some of my past books. I do. I talk about this whole idea of, what are the odds that we're really going to raise that one, and who knows what the statistics really are, but the way we give up our weekends for club sports, I mean, and we did that. My husband and I engaged in a lot of that, and it was part of some of the burnout that we had as parents, to where we had to have a little come to Jesus meeting at some point along the way and say, okay, we're done with this. You get to sign up for whatever you want, and we're moving to a plan of, one activity per child per season, which still is a whole lot.
That's still a lot.
You said you have what, 6 kids? I had 3, so
Yeah.
it still breeds a lot of insanity and chaos in the home, even so. So
Yeah. Yeah. You spend some time in the book talking about the idea that, when Jesus says, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. And I appreciate you saying that doesn't mean he's going to help you check off your to-do list.
that's right.
And you didn't say this, but it's not even a promise to give you the strength to check off your own to-do list.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Yes.
we have insane to-do lists. And one suspects that Jesus would say, sorry, I'm not going to help you do that.
Right.
I'm not going to equip you to do an insane amount of anything.
I love that you brought that up, because this has been one of those passages of scripture that I feel like the Lord has been working on with me. I mean, probably ever since I became a Christian, which was a long, long time ago, 40 years ago. And it seems to be, I'm one of these, I thrive on activity. I thrive on busyness. I used to equate a full calendar as, wow, that must mean that I'm doing something right. And so when I was raising children, it was their activities. And obviously I was writing, I was speaking, I was traveling. But really what Jesus is telling us there is that not only am I not going to help you by coming alongside you and maintaining this pace with you by carrying the load, I'm going to challenge you to actually take a look at that calendar. And so I do address in the book, if we were to discover the grace of good enough, first of all, we have to have the margin to do so. And that was a hard concept for me, in particular, to learn that margin is that buffer of time that it gives us space between our load and our limit. And, and it varies from person to person, doesn't it? Some people are just better able to carry, I don't want to say a heavier load, but maybe juggle more things at once.
Yeah.
Others not so much. And believe that can be part of your temperament or personality, that you're born with. But we all need to learn to have, margin and time, not just with the Lord, but with our, to spend on self-care for ourselves. And so that was a hard concept for me. And I think for many moms in my generation, because you look around and you see what other parents are doing. And then you also have your children who are asking to do more at times, or sign up for this or sign up for that, or go on these trips, or this, whatever it is, all the things. And so it's easy to get, in that trap of thinking that we are providing our children with this magical childhood, and that's our role, right? So, and that's a whole nother chapter too, toward the end, is this idea of a magical childhood could be buying them all the things. It could be signing up for all the things. And here I am, I think 15 years now. My husband and I are now into the empty nest years, and became, ironically, grandparents the year our last child left. So that's, in some ways makes it easier. In other ways, I don't know,
Yeah, right.
we just kind of changed tracks, almost simultaneously, from parents in the trenches to now we're grandparents in the trenches. And so, I think those can be some hard concepts to learn along the way. But now looking back very clearly, I want to just sometimes go back and slap myself silly over some of the things that I told myself. You're being a good mom to sign your kids up for all these things. And then fast forward to where I am today, and my children are parenting their own children. And, and we'll have a conversation, and they're like, was I in soccer every season? Did I play? And I'm like, wait a minute, for all the time we spent in our car, and you have a memory of this, a core memory of, and that's the reality of it, is you're going to look back on so much of this, and it's just going to be a fog anyway.
Yeah.
Not just for you, but for your children. So if you're doing it for your children.
That's a great point. It's I don't know why we're so terrified of the possibility that our kids might be disappointed.
Yes.
I was disappointed all the time when I was little. I mean, and it's just,
Right, right.
and it's just what it means to be a human being is to be disappointed sometimes. And
It
it's not
is.
going to kill anybody.
No, and I would add to that too. It's part of life to be bored sometimes.
Yeah.
It's part of life to be sad sometimes. And I think, Jonathan, you kind of hit the nail on the head earlier when you were talking about our tendency is to want to fix things or manage things, or, I think it comes from a very sincere place within us as parents we want our children to be comfortable. And if we had it our way, we would want these in lives, or times where they're disappointed. And yet, the irony is so often that is where their faith grows and takes
Mhm.
root. And in those moments, they learn that it's actually a good thing that my parents aren't superheroes. They can't come along and fix everything because I need to be able to lean on the Lord and discover Him as my ultimate, this is where my satisfaction is found. This
Yeah.
is where fulfillment is found in life. And so those are actually good things, but yet I like how you said, why are we so afraid when this is actually, that's that thing that in many ways nudges them toward the Lord, away from mom and dad, and toward the Lord to a
Yeah.
place of dependence on Him.
Well, it's that's another one of those ideas that everybody can agree with in their head, but
Right.
we don't want our kids pulling away from us, even
No.
to pull to something better. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
all right, I'm going to ask you one more question. I want to talk about. I want to get into your history as a writer who's also a mother, not just your history but your insights. But I do want to touch on one more thing before we get into that, before we shift to that topic, and that is in the book you frame these questions in terms of idolatry. That we can make an idol of motherhood, make an idol of, or let's say parenthood, since this is true, not as true for men, but can be, and make an idol of our children. Here's one thing I would like for you to speak to. I can imagine a mother reading this. She's already overwhelmed, already feels inadequate, feels guilty, feels burdened. She's reading your book for some relief, and then she says, "Oh, and I'm an idolater too, on top of being inadequate." And can you bridge that? How is this good news that
Sure. Okay. First of
we're
all,
being idolaters?
yes, I try to set the tone in the introduction of the book. And, first of all, confessing that I've been that idolater,
Mm-hmm.
that motherhood had been at some point my highest affection. If you look at it like, okay, Jesus Christ is our primary, ultimate affection. Well, oftentimes we find that in our Christian walk, we are constantly battling these little gods that come along and attempt to take the place of our primary, ultimate affection.
Mm-hmm.
And so motherhood can be one of those things. Our children can be one of those things. And I share with the mothers that if that is where you find yourself, that actually really speaks well to the love that you have for your children and how
Mm-hmm.
serious you take that job. And so I want to let them off the hook for that. And first of all, sharing personally, this has been my story. I think that helps. I'm not this older lady on down the road that's pointing a finger of blame in your generation. They just, I'm saying, no, my generation got some things right and we got some things wrong, just as your generation, well, you can say the same for. And so I really try to take on the tone of being more of an encourager, a cheerleader. This is
Mm-hmm.
the book I wish that I had had, that my generation could have used in these years, because what we really long for, even if the truth hurts, right? And the truth might hurt to hear that motherhood may have become an idol, but at the end of the day, it's a good thing to feel that conviction, and with that necessary sort of righting getting it right, repentance, and turning back to the Lord to look to Him for really as that the only thing that could fill that void in your life. Because I think if we're looking at it in that familiar analogy of the void, children can easily fill that void, can't they? I mean, they're needy in the young years. They're all consuming their activities. There's no shortage of them. And so if we're not careful, then we just wake up one day and we realize, well, the void has now been full and I'm exhausted and I'm tired. And so I do believe that moms picking this book up, if they can relate to that on any level, they would welcome the news that this is not what God has for you, but what he does have for you is something better. And this is where you will find true freedom. And not only is it great for you, but modeling that for your children.
Yeah.
Because you're not doing your children any favors to put them at the center of your life, to become desperately dependent on you, to then launch them out of the nest and they're struggling themselves as you're struggling to find your identity. So
Yeah.
these are all good things. But yes, you're right. It can be uncomfortable to come to terms with some, just sort of, realizations but they need to happen. It's part of our spiritual growth.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So you've been writing for a long time.
I have.
And you started publishing books when your kids were pretty small. I'd love to hear you reflect on, I run a membership for writers. The great majority of them are women, and many of them are mothers, and they're trying to figure out, how do I write and be a mother, and how do I do these things? I'd love to hear you reflect on what it was like, what worked, what didn't work, what you wish you had known in 1998.
Sure. Yes, 1998, I had, let's see, a 5-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 10-year-old. And that was my first Bible study was published. And then every year thereafter, for probably a good 15 to 17 years, I had one or more books or Bible studies come out. So it was a pretty crazy pace. That was really the entire duration of, when my children were in the nest. And so my children were very familiar with, seeing mom with a laptop, or I should say a desktop, sitting in front of remember those, Jonathan? The desktop computer in the kitchen and tapping away frantically to meet the urgent book deadline. And after already having asked 3 times if you could get an extension, and sharing with your, editor that you have all kinds of things that have come up, usually with your children, and on and on. And so I understand, what it looks like to juggle all of that. It's funny now that I am in this stage of life where it is more relaxed, and such. My husband oftentimes will look back and go, how did we do that? And all I know is at the time you do it. If it's your passion, if it is a calling, then you find time to do it. And I'm so grateful that I did carve out time to do that. And oftentimes it was after my children went to bed. I would stay up and I would, work then, and then I would do the morning, carpool shuttle, and sometimes I'd come home and I'd take a quick cat nap, and then I'd get back to it, and then I started speaking and traveling, and my husband and I had some rules along the way where we just knew it wasn't good for me to be gone more than 8 times, a year on an airplane trip, where, especially in the younger years, and he was working full time as well. So we were doing the best we could. It looks different for everyone. But I would encourage the moms who have this passion to write and a calling, if you will, that it also helped me when my last child left, because it was a craft that I've been, developing and building over the years. It was something that it recharged me to just to be engaged in writing. And then I didn't feel like when the last one left the nest, I have no purpose. I have no calling. What am I supposed to do? Go pick up pickleball? I think mahjong, is that a thing now? What are the things we're supposed to do? Do I go get a job? And so, it was something that felt familiar to me when things were feeling kind of, a new normal. That was something that still felt very comfortable for me. And so I know it's crazy, when you're in the thick of it and you're trying to raise the kids, but I encourage them to look for it. You'll have to be creative, but to look for those blocks of time when you can write, not to put too much pressure on yourself. Never, ever, if I could give them the wisdom and counsel, never sign a multi-book deal if you have children.
Yeah.
My first book
That's
deal,
a good one right
Jonathan,
there.
was a 6-book deal.
Yeah.
And I remember having lunch with Beth Moore at the time, and she cautioned me against signing a multi-book deal because my kids were young, and I
Yeah.
did it anyway. And I'm here to attest it was one of the biggest regrets that
Yeah.
I ever had, because it locks you in. I mean, literally, the moment you have one book coming out, you've already started writing the next one, and then they want media campaigns. And that was my fault. That was on me.
Yeah.
So,
One thing as I've already mentioned, so many of the people in my membership are women and mothers, and one thing I tell them as often as I can is nobody has ever said, you know what I loved about my childhood? The dishes were always done.
I love that. I love that.
You
Yes.
know, I mean, it's you by doing that work with your kids right there, you are modeling to them. Even though your books were saying motherhood is the highest calling, and you've repented, we're not going to. That's what the book said, but they also saw here's a woman, a person who is pursuing a calling, and you modeled for them, your boys and your daughter alike. There's more to women than making sure you little people are the center of the universe. Which
Yes.
you've already said
Amen
this.
to
That's
that.
not a healthy thing for anybody to think
No.
they're the center of the universe.
Jonathan, I feel so, feel such compassion for the mothers today, because they are bombarded with all kinds of things online. I mean, they have these mom influencers. You just get on social media and you have moms, and it's like, it's not good enough to go, make your children their school lunch. You've got to now have a sourdough starter in your kitchen at all times and make your bread from scratch,
Yeah.
and
Cut it
have a
out the
little
shape of a
herb
dinosaur.
garden and go outside and pick yeah, I mean, and so it's too much. And
Yeah.
so I joked in earlier books and said, no child, it's not going to make or break a child if they have one too many taco nights during the week. And so
Yeah.
sometimes if you've got a book deadline or you're working on a project, once again, your child is not going to look back and go, remember that time we had tacos 3 nights in a row.
Yeah.
They just are not going to remember those things.
Yeah.
And
Your
I'm
kid
not
didn't even
saying
remember
that you
that you
just
drove them to soccer every day.
I can't even remember which ones were in soccer at this point or what sports they were in. And for all the time you spend doing those things, if they can't remember it, if you can't remember it 10, 15 years on down the road, did it really matter at the
Yeah.
time? Probably
Yeah.
not. So,
Yeah.
I encourage the moms as they're kind of evaluating their calendars to keep that in mind, with this sort of empty nest perspective, that a day will come when you'll look back and go, huh, in the scheme of all that, that didn't really matter.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you could redeem some of that margin in time for yourself and your craft.
Yeah. I'd like to clarify one thing you said, Vicki, and that is you said if you have a deadline or a book deal, I think even just modeling, mom's going to do some creative time right now. Whether you've got, forget about book deals, forget about
I love that.
deadlines.
Yes.
Just this is what we do here in this
Most
house.
writers are creatives, just, and so it's not just, typically you don't find a writer that writing's my only thing.
Hmm.
And I know that was true for me. I had other things that would have made great creative outlets. Sometimes it can get monotonous to sit in front of your computer wordsmithing throughout the day, and it can just give you just need to walk away and find something else, maybe a different sort of creative outlet. And so I didn't discover that until after my children left the nest. And but I would, just things like going outside and picking fresh flowers for yourself. Or I started, I think it was COVID, we all learned to tap into any sort of creative anything that we had because of the just in general monotony going on. So I discovered that it was recharging for me to learn to do some embroidery or needlepoint. Just things that you wouldn't. I just spent over 60 hours building a dollhouse for a granddaughter. And, every glue gun and every splinter that I endured is worth it on this side of it, because I was tackling something that tapped into other creative outlets that I didn't even know I had, and showed me that you can do these hard things that you didn't think you could do. And then when I would turn my attention back to a book deadline or working on that chapter, I felt, recharged because I don't know how I'm not even sure how to explain the phenomenon, but oftentimes I think that's the way the Lord does that. He's like, you just need to take a break,
Yep.
catch your breath, go do
Hmm.
something else. And
Yep.
I understand your moms are not they don't have 1 hour, much less 60 hours to go tell your grandparents to build the dollhouse right now, but they can go pick flowers for themselves
Yeah.
or go grab a coffee drink or go get their nails done or, whatever it is for them that recharges them is going to be important in that process.
Yeah. Um, I like that idea. You said you did made a dollhouse. I think it's important for people our age to try stuff they're not very good at. I think we can really let our world shrink down to what we're already good at.
Yes, I
Yeah,
love that.
especially
Now,
once again, you and I are a little older, and when you're young, people are always having to do stuff that they're not. The teacher tells you to do something, whether you're good at it or not, you have to do it. But you and I settle into, okay, I'm pretty good at A, B, and C, and I'm going to try to revolve around A, B, and C instead of trying. I've never put together a dollhouse. Probably wouldn't be
now,
very good at
now
it, but
it's
it would
on
be
your
good for me.
list. Now it's on your list,
That's
right?
right. Yeah.
No, I think we do need to, you're absolutely right. Challenge ourselves to kind of get out of our comfort zones, if you will, right? Because
Yeah.
it is easy to settle in. And after a while, then you wake up one day and you're like, I really don't have the physical capacity
Yeah.
or perhaps mental capacity to entertain doing a lot of new things. So, my husband and I are constantly challenging each other outside of our boxes. Right now, he's taken up pickleball and is asking me to learn it. So I don't know, maybe this conversation will inspire me to venture out. And if I can put a dollhouse together, surely I can
Surely.
maybe play one game without getting injured. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's
I
the
was about to
goal.
say, when it comes to ankles, the dollhouse is a lot easier than the pickleball.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Okay. I didn't warn you about this, but you can handle it. My typical last question is, who are the writers that make you want to write? Not the same question as who are your favorite writers, but
Oh no, you didn't
what do
give
you
me
read and,
any
and then and
warning.
then want to go write something?
What do I read and then want to go write something? Okay, this is very random,
Okay.
but I stumbled upon, okay, I'm a huge thrifter and I
Okay.
love going into, antique shops or thrift stores. And I love perusing the old classic books.
Hmm.
And so I stumbled upon, this is probably a good decade ago, World's Best Sermons. And it came out of it was a book from, I want to say the late 1800s. It was in
Really?
pretty good shape. I mean, I couldn't get enough of this book.
Really?
And I started thumbing through them. And one of them was a Scottish minister, Thomas Chalmers, and his
Hmm.
famous sermon, The Expulsive Power of a New Affection.
Yeah.
And I read that, and it since has been paraphrased into more modern vernacular to where we can read it and actually understand what he's
Hmm.
talking about. But I was reading it just in the exact, words he wrote it in. And
Wow.
so it showed me, first of all, just how I, how this whole idea of that we hear it, the God-shaped vacuum. I'm probably outing myself in the sense of I grew up in the Baptist church, and you hear about that God-shaped vacuum. We all have it, and you're going to fill it with a variety of things. And I remember it just connecting for me. And wait, this guy, he's I think he was born in 1760 something,
Mhm.
and yet he's speaking to the same principle at that
Yeah.
time in this beautiful, beautiful sermon that he gave. And so I would say that inspires me. And one of the things I try to do is I go back and I read some of those sermons from that
Yeah.
classic book
Uh-huh.
each year. I try to read his sermon at least every 1 to 3 years and glean something new every
Yeah.
time. But I find every time I read it, I feel like, I want to write that book next, or I want to write this
Yeah.
book. And
Yeah.
and so that just for me, maybe that's weird. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not a modern day writer.
Yeah.
It's one of the
Real
dead
quickly
guys.
before he's very Thomas Chalmers is very popular among Presbyterians, I have to say.
I learned that later. Yeah.
Yeah. Give us a quick. You said the expulsive power of a new affection, as if that was something everybody would know what that meant. But give us a quick definition of the explosive power of a new affection?
I just remember it, and I'm probably going on 3 years of having not read it now, so you're catching me off guard here.
Yeah.
But what I remember, what I think one of the greatest takeaways I took from it is that that we all will chase after. And again, you see this with Timothy Keller, right? Writing about counterfeit gods is another popular book that I loved of his. I wonder if he hadn't read The Explosive Power of a New Affection, and in he was inspired to write that book at that point. But this whole idea that our lives are spent, our Christian walks, if you will, you have to be aware of the fact that we're going to constantly be wanting to dethrone the place that Christ takes in our lives, our hearts. That is the only thing that will fill that void, is this affection that we have for Christ. And otherwise, we're going to constantly be pushing these little tiny gods that can be your children, that can be a hobby, that can be, it could be a variety of good things, it could be not so good things. And so that was, the takeaway that I gleaned from the book, because it was something that over time, it just doesn't change, does it? Yeah. And I think it really taps into every culture where we find the gospel being preached, certainly where we are as a country today. It speaks to our generation. It speaks to the youngest generation. Well,
when you mentioned Thomas Chalmers, I thought, well, that makes a lot of sense, that this book that you wrote, that you would be a fan of that idea of the explosive power of a new affection, because, as you said, there's this vacuum that things keep getting drawn into, that I'm going to fill that hole with, and as you said, it might be good things, might be bad things, and what could be better than kids and raising kids?
And I think we're less aware when it is the good things, Jonathan. We're less aware. We know those bad things are not good for us, and it's not doing the trick. But the good things don't do the trick either.
That's right.
They're just, try as we may. We are not going to be able to quench whatever that is in our souls that is longing for Jesus Christ, and how only He can fill that void.
Yeah. So it's that new affection that expels
the
false idols. And so I love it.
It's inspired me to go read it again.
Go read it again. It's good idea.
Long past due.
Yeah. Vicki, Courtney, thanks for being here. It's been so much fun. And I hope a lot of people will read your book and benefit from it. The Habit Podcast is brought to you by The Rabbit Room, where art nourishes community and community nourishes art. You can support their work, including this podcast, by becoming a member. Visit rabbitroom.com/membership. Special thanks as well to Taylor Leonard for letting us use her song Diamonds as the theme music for the Habit Podcast. You can learn more about Taylor and follow her work at taylorleonard.com. The Habit Membership is a library of resources for writers by me, Jonathan Rogers. More importantly, The Habit is a hub of community where like-minded writers gather to discuss their work and give each other a little more courage. Find out more at thehabit.co.
If you've enjoyed this podcast episode, consider joining the Rabbit Room membership. Your membership helps sustain this community, funding everything from publishing and podcasts and theater productions to events and programs that support artists who create with a Christ-centered vision. We'd love to have you on board. Learn more at rabbitroom.com/member.